Gary Vaynerchuk I just watched, I don't know when it was recorded. I didn't pay that much attention to it. But the podcast title, the video is, he's on with two young ladies. That's something like the Burnout podcast. I'll have to look at it and put that in the show notes. But it was something about how to stay, oh my gosh, let me just take a look at this real quick. Yeah, how to stay relevant in the most competitive era ever. That's the name of it. Okay. And it seems that the two ladies, they're from, what is it called? Yeah, at the Burnouts with a S, so more than one burnout, I guess, because there's plural. And more than anything else in that podcast, what really stuck out to me is something that Gary Vaynerchuk has mentioned often. And I may not be completely understanding him because he is pretty thorough about a lot of things that he says, and he's very open-minded about a lot of things. And I have a lot of respect for the information he puts out and the way he goes about things. He's an operator. He's boots on the ground. He does a lot of things. He's hands-on, so he knows what he's talking about. I just may not be understanding. So the thing he's talking about is what I'm here addressing is the opinions and the observations about treatment of the elderly and older people in society and respect. And this is something I deeply understand. I remember there was a guy, John, who I knew in California, and there was a woman who worked out at the gym there when I was a trainer. He was also a member that I, began to associate with. And I remember the kind of comments that he used to make about people. It was like, oh, look at her, she's working out, she's all old. And I used to think that was so weird that people would make comments about people because they were older in this very disrespectful way, as if we're not all, passing through time and will eventually be that age. And if people don't take care of themselves, they're going to be dependent on others. And I mean, what are you saying that? Like, that I never understood. And it kind of goes along too with a lot of other things that I don't get with people, like the whole, guy talk banter, where guys supposedly are supposed to be in these conversations with each other where they're having these vulgar, disrespectful conversations about women. And I know that they exist because a lot of the people that I would have associated with when I was in middle school, high school, whatever, people talk like that. And I never was about it. That's why I don't hang out with a lot of people, because for some reason a lot of folks feel like that's the way they have to talk because other people are doing it. And it never made any sense to me to, talking about girls being bitch this and all this other stuff like that, and all the talk about the disrespect and women it's all that stuff. But this is somewhat in a similar category of just having to do with respect in general, right? And so one of the issue I have with the conversation is that in one end I hear, Gary Vaynerchuk is talking about how, he's noticed people, like, for example, there'll be a 76-year-old woman in an airport lugging around stuff, and there's a lot of younger people sitting around and no one will get up and offer her a seat. I get that. That's disrespectful. But that's in one category all by itself of looking at the age of someone and their fitness and their ability, right? If that person looks obviously like they're struggling or helpless, or even might be giving signals that they need help, or even just because if you're just a good person, you might just simply offer your seat up to them. I do it all the time, not just for the elderly, but for children and for women, just because. And I'm close in age to Gary Vaynerchuk. He was born in 75, I was born in 77. So I get it. I understand, and it's just a thing for me, holding doors open for people, offering up the seat, so on and so forth. Respectful, smiling. being helpful and respectful to people, just based on the fact that people might need it. That's it. And so I understand that part. The other part of the conversation that doesn't agree with me is the discussion around how, there was a time when older people, their 80s, whatever, 60s, 70s, 80s, younger people would sit around and listen to the things that they would have to say and listen to their stories and listen to the stuff that they have to say. And that's, the way it was. And we had respect for their stories and we learned about their wisdom and experience. However, age does not automatically determine wisdom. Just because people are older does not mean they're wiser. And I am not saying that this is what Gary Vaynerchuk is saying. I'm saying that because I have a slight bit of confusion about what he may have been saying, other people may hear that and think that this is like a blanket thing and that's what is being said. So he may not be saying that, but I'm making it clear to myself that I see completely two different categories here. That one, yes, when you see elderly people, disabled people, pregnant women in general, and and children, just and I'm talking about from a man's perspective. Not just being male, because there's a lot of males who, regardless of their age, are boys, and they're very childish, which is distinguished from childlike. I'm very childlike, but they're just very immature, disrespectful, unaware people who have no self-reflection, and that goes hand in hand with that. But from being a man and someone who looks at other people who may need help regardless of whatever is going on with them, I understand that category and that part of it. However, this whole thing about just befriending and listening to older people just because they're older, right? And again, I'm not saying that Gary Vaynerchuk was saying that just because they're older, they're wiser. But this is a thing, however, though, that is implied a lot of times, that because people are older, we should listen to and respect the things that they have to say because somehow age makes them inherently, due to the passage of chronological time, makes them wise. And this is so far from the truth. And another part of the conversation is, for example, how a lot of older people don't understand technology. And one of the young ladies on the podcast from the Burnouts podcast that I saw on Gary's channel was saying this, how she's very concerned about how, people in their 70s or whatever are running the government and they don't know a lot about technology and things like that, and that's very concerning. Now, you see, that right there is the reason why not every elder person, people aren't wise. If you don't have the wherewithal to keep up with things that are going on in the world, that the advances that are being made, if you're of the mindset that, and goes to the whole idea of the Luddites, right? People who every technology is dangerous. Gary brings up the idea about how, people in electricity, people wanted to stay with candlelight because there were demons in the electricity, right? If you're of that kind of mindset, that's a problem that you have regardless of how old you are, and that may be carried over from how you were nurtured, whoever brought you up, and have those kind of ideas. But if you're an older person and you're of that mind, I don't want to listen to you for none of that stuff. There might be some other interesting things about you, but just because you're older doesn't mean you're wiser in any way, shape, or form. And so that's a categorically different area about respect. You don't just get my respect because you're older and you've been around longer. Older people don't necessarily have better things to say. I know people who are older who are just fall over blackout drunks still in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. They don't get my respect. You can't, it's been that long and you're still doing this stuff. You're still trying to womanize and you don't know anything. You're not reading books. You're not educating yourself. You're not continuing to grow. That's a problem. That's not something that I'm And it doesn't matter who you are. That's not what I'm putting myself around. And things like that go in across every category. And this matches and maps very well with the idea of how you become the sum total of the 5 to 7 people you spend most of your time with. So here's what I'm saying. It doesn't matter how old you are or what your gender is, your race is, your income level, or anything like that. Stupid is stupid. If you're not doing things that are continually leveling up and becoming the best person that you possibly can be every single day, and learning and growing and understanding what your mistakes are and what you need to be and can be doing in life, right? I'm not listening to you. I don't care how old you are or how long you've been on the planet or how many years you stacked up. Because there's a lot of people who are older who just say just dumb things. But then again, unfortunately, that's a lot of people in general. Because unfortunately, many people are like pack animals and follow what other people are doing because it's normal, and don't realize that one of the best definitions of normal is statistically most frequent. And it has nothing to do with ethics or morality or whether something's good or bad. It just means that it's what most people are doing. And just because most people are doing something does not mean that it's good or bad. And so you need discernment and awareness and self-awareness especially, and using logic, reasoning, rationale, and especially critical thinking to determine whether or not the information that you are receiving, for whatever reason you're receiving it, is worth allowing to get past your critical filter and become part of your new thinking and behavioral strategies and the way that you live your life. And that goes with everything. So, again, I'm not claiming that Gary Vaynerchuk does not know the difference between these things. I'm just clarifying it. I think it's a good point to clarify. I think it's a good piece of content and a good thing for people to understand that we should be respectful to people because they deserve the benefit of the doubt, and that starts with respect until they don't deserve our respect anymore because they're being disrespectful. And that goes for everybody all the time. And so, and again, as a man, that goes for me in the categories of the elderly, pregnant women, children, animals, any being that has less of a capacity in any given moment, because I'm not saying that people that fit those categories that I'm speaking of, right, those demographics, have less capacity overall. This is certain situations. And I'm also being very clear that I'm admitting that this is an old-fashioned sort of traditional thing about me that I just hold very strongly to. If I'm walking with a woman, whether she's someone I'm romantically involved or not, I walk on the outside of the street. That's it. Things like that. I don't gather around with guys and speak disrespectfully about women. I mean, I don't do it in general at all. I don't have cabals of people or conspiracies with others where I'm sitting around talking smack about people. I just don't do it. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's a waste of time. It doesn't help anything or anyone. Everything that I talk about is planning how to do and be better. That's what my life is. The things that I'm saying now in public are the things you'll hear me saying to myself and behind closed doors and in my dreams and all the most private moments that I have. It doesn't change. It's how and what I am. So, and then, of course, the final part, once again, is, age does not determine wisdom. Everything must be judged on a case-by-case level. And that actually applies to both of these points about age or just respect in general. Everything is case by case. everything is situational. We owe it to ourselves and others to be able to determine how we're going to treat others based on the present and what's in front of us and what we can determine in that way. So I know that I understand where I'm coming from, and I've been clear on this, and it is my intention that other people understand and are clear about what I'm saying. But these things, I've thought about them for a while, and just because I'm on another Gary Vaynerchuk marathon, it's just come to mind, and so I wanted to address it and put that there. Being a philosopher of metaphysical sciences, it's part of my wheelhouse, and it's also personal interest. I'm Hakeem Ali-Bocas Alexander.